Oh, I thought it was coming up to midnight for the new year, and someone requested Shake, Rattle, and Roll. I wasn't doing too well till I heard the tape, and once I heard that, I said, well, let's...
Something odd has arisen about Roy Orbison, the dark glasses man with that memorable, haunting voice. For decades, fans thought they knew him. They sang along to "Oh, Pretty Woman." They felt the pain in crying, and they thought his songs said it all. But now there is new information, and it's not only surprising, it's unsettling to the core. Behind the elegant voice and enigmatic smile was something quite different.
He tells you that you've got money or you don't have money. It doesn't mean anything, you know.
Something he never talked about. And once you know it, you'll never hear his songs the same way again. The truth could very well change everything. Early beginnings. Roy Orbison was born on April 23, 1936, in Vernon, Texas. He was the second of three brothers in the family. His father, Orby Lee Orbison, was an oil field driller, but had a hard time getting consistent work after the Great Depression. His mother, Nadine, enjoyed painting and writing poems. Roy's family lineage dated back to Ireland. His great-great-grandfather arrived from Lurgan in the 1700s and settled in Pennsylvania. In 1942, the family relocated to Fort Worth so his parents could work at aircraft factories during World War II. Roy was born with poor eyesight as a child and started wearing thick glasses at the age of 4. On his 6th birthday, his father presented him with a guitar, and he learned to play from both his father and older brother. When he was 7 years old, Roy was convinced that music was all he should be doing. He enjoyed country and western swing, particularly Lefty Frizzell's style, and his favorite singers were Hank Williams and Jimmie Rodgers. At age 8, Roy was singing on his local radio program, and before long, he was hosting the show. At age 9, he won an on-air contest on KVWC radio, which quickly resulted in his own weekly program. The family relocated numerous times, eventually settling in Wink, Texas, in 1946. Roy characterized Wink as nothing more than football, oil, grease, and sand. Feet sons. Roy was shy, bashful over his blonde hair, which he dyed black, and liked to play guitar at recess rather than sports. In 1949, at age 13, Roy began his first band, the Wink Westerners, with high school classmates. They performed country, western swing, and even Glenn Miller-esque jazz. They played in area bars, hosted a morning radio show, and soon made it to weekly television appearances. In 1954, Roy graduated from high school and attended North Texas State College to pursue a degree in geology, just in case music failed to pan out. But he soon lost interest in classes and concentrated on music. During this time, he found the song Ooby Dooby and wanted to make a recording of it. Roy left college by 1955, joined another group known as the Teen Kings, and got to know Claudette Frady, his future wife. The Teen Kings performed Ooby Dooby in 1956, and after a series of legal battles, they signed with Sun Records, which housed Elvis Presley and Johnny Cash. The song had 200,000 sales and peaked at number 59 on the Billboard charts, but subsequent singles failed to chart. The band member tensions increased, and by the later part of 1956, the Teen Kings were dissolved. Later, Roy secured employment as a songwriter with Acuff Rose Music. While working there, he met Joe Melson, and they started writing the songs that would propel Roy Orbison to stardom during the early 1960s. His wife's affair and divorce. By the mid-1960s, Roy Orbison's life appeared to be perfect on the surface. He was a hitmaker with a series of hits, a dream job, and a stunning wife, Claudette Frady, who had inspired one of his most popular songs, Oh, Pretty Woman. However, behind closed doors, life was very far from perfect. By autumn 1964, their relationship was in trouble. The stresses of fame, endless touring, and extended periods apart had worn them down. Roy himself was not a complete innocent. Friends later confessed that he had occasionally treated himself to a groupie on tour. And then, the final insult. Claudette started carrying on with a man who was appallingly close to the family. That man was Braxton Dixon, the contractor constructing the Orbison family's new home. When Roy was touring, Claudette and Braxton became intimate. When Roy learned of the affair, it devastated him. In classic Roy fashion, he didn't publicly implode. But he made a very calculated statement. He immediately dismissed Braxton Dixon and insisted he not complete the house. Instead, Roy worked on the project himself, employing a single carpenter to assist him in completing it. By the spring of 1965, the marriage was irreparably damaged. Roy validated that he and Claudette were divorced. It was a difficult period for both of them, and fans were dismayed to learn the news. After all, Claudette had been his love of life, the inspiration behind one of his greatest songs. But the tale did not end there. Later that year, something unforeseen occurred. Claudette gave birth to their third child. Their common joy of becoming parents again reunited them. Gradually, they started making up, and in December 1965, merely months subsequent to finalizing their divorce, Roy and Claudette wedded again. It looked like a fairy tale ending, two individuals reuniting after errors and heartache. But in reality, this was just one part of a story that would see more twists, victories, and tragedies in the years ahead. Their reunion was genuine, but destiny had other things in store for Roy and Claudette. Motorcycle accident and tragic loss of Claudette. By 1966, it looked as if Roy Orbison's life was at last stabilizing in happier ways. Despite all the twists and turns, he and Claudette were together once again, and the public adored the tale of their second marriage. Claudette had even toured with Roy in the UK, and wherever they traveled, people rejoiced at seeing the two back together. Roy was also becoming a force on stage, and sometimes taking chances that would leave other performers shaken. During a performance one evening in the UK, Roy was caught up in a very public accident. On stage in front of thousands of fans, he took a tumble from a motorcycle and broke his foot. It would have been enough for most to call off the show, but not Roy. That evening, foot in a cast, he took to the stage, refusing to let down the audience. It was a preview of his unrelenting work ethic, but also of the couple's mutual passion for motorcycles, something Roy had developed years before from his friend Elvis Presley. That love of motorcycle riding would ultimately result in tragedy. Roy and Claudette were riding their motorcycles home from Bristol, Tennessee, on June 6, 1966. The day was likely much like any other, wind in the face, open road leading the way. But in Gallatin, Tennessee, everything would change in a matter of seconds. A pickup truck ran into Claudette's motorcycle, sending her tumbling through the air. The crash was terrible. She was taken to the hospital, but the damage to her liver was too extensive. Claudette Orbison was dead. She was 25 years old. It was a loss unthinkable to Roy. Claudette wasn't merely his wife, she was his muse, the inspiration for songs such as "Oh, Pretty Woman." Their relationship had survived storms, but they had struggled to restore it. And now, barely months after getting back to each other, she was dead. The crash not only destroyed Roy's private life, but it left a scar on his music, infusing it with a greater sadness for the rest of his career that listeners would hear. Film project and musical decline. With the abrupt passing of Claudette, Roy Orbison was heartbroken. Music had always been his sanctuary, so he turned to work as a means of getting over the heartache. He joined forces with his regular partner, Bill Dees, to work on something new, composing songs for MGM's film The Fastest Guitar Alive. Initially, the film was planned to be a genuine Western, but the project veered into some bizarre direction in the process. The script was retuned into a light-hearted comedy, with Roy himself featured in the title role. a spy whose guitar was not only for singing, but could shoot bullets like a rifle. It was an offbeat idea, and for some reason, it didn't resonate with the public. When the movie was finally released, it failed, both critically and at the box office. It was that kind of letdown that's tough to recover from, particularly when Roy had signed a deal for 5 films. Following the poor reception, the last 4 films were shelved quietly, and The Fastest Guitar Alive became the first and last of his film career. Nevertheless, Roy did not give up on music. He made tribute albums to 2 of his idols, Don Gibson and Hank Williams. Though sincere, these albums failed to sell. The music industry was rapidly changing in the late 1960s. The counterculture movement was gaining control, with psychedelic rock, protest tunes, and a totally new sound filling the charts. Roy's signature style, emotional ballads with sweeping arrangements, suddenly felt out of step with the times. By March 1967, he had released Cry Softly Lonely One, a song that barely crept into the top 100. Roy would not have another song on the U.S. charts again for more than a decade. It was a quiet, hard time for his career, where it appeared that the world had moved forward, leaving behind the man behind the dark glasses struggling to regain his foothold. House fire and death of his sons. By the time 1968 had come around, Roy Orbison had already suffered heartbreak beyond anyone's wildest dreams. 2 years before, he had lost Claudette to a motorcycle accident. But fate was not yet done with him. While touring on stage in Birmingham, England, on September 14, 1968, Roy was informed of something that would shake him to his very foundations. His home in Hendersonville, Tennessee, was on fire. The fire spread rapidly, engulfing the entire house. Within it were his 2 oldest sons, Roy Jr. and Anthony. Although efforts were made to rescue them, both of the boys sadly perished in the fire. They were children, full of life and with so much to live for. The authorities later suspected an aerosol can of lacquer as a possible starting point of the fire. But the cause could never totally remove the anguish of what had occurred. For Roy, the loss was nearly unsustainable, and losing a wife was bad enough. But losing 2 of his children in such a violent, shocking manner left him emotionally devastated. Friends and co-workers remembered that for a while he was like a different person, quieter, withdrawn, and unable to compose songs. Music had always been his comfort zone, but in the wake of the fire, even that could not provide solace to him. The house itself was ultimately purchased by his friend Johnny Cash. In a haunting coincidence, years after that, Cash's house on the very same land would burn as well, adding another bizarre and tragic entry to the history of the land. For Roy, the fire represented one of the lowest points of his existence. It was a harsh reminder of how easily pleasure can be lost, and it left wounds that would never fully recover. And yet somehow, in spite of it all, he would find a way to continue on, though the pain would never, ever abandon him. Life in London and a new chapter in love. After all the heartache Roy Orbison had been through, life took another surprising turn while he was on tour in the UK in 1968. He was residing in London with his old friend Bobby Blackburn in an apartment. The two were famous for living life in the extreme, and that extended to their girlfriends too. In fact, they had a light-hearted calendar tracking visits from various women, a quirk that indicated they weren't quite leading monk-like lifestyles. It was there that Roy encountered Barbara Wellhonen, a 16-year-old German woman who was in London for a visit. She was young and vibrant and caught the eye of Roy immediately. He was captivated by her vibrancy and beauty, although he did not give up on seeing other women just yet. Barbara was different, however. With time, their bond grew stronger, and Roy made up his mind to take the leap of marriage once more, despite the age gap between them and the fact that his own life had already witnessed so much. On May 25, 1969, Roy married Barbara. Roy was 33 at the time, while Barbara's age differed between reports. Some said she was 17 and others said 19. Either way, she was much younger, and the marriage caused a few raised eyebrows. But Roy seemed happy to have found companionship again. In the meantime, his domestic duties didn't vanish. Roy's youngest son with Claudette, Wesley, who was born in 1965, was still young and required attention. Roy was always on the road for tours and couldn't offer stability a child would require, so Wesley was brought up by Roy's parents. They provided him with a home life apart from the whirlwind of Roy's career. With Barbara, Roy started a new family. Their first son, Roy Kelton Orbison Jr., was born in 1970, and 5 years later, they welcomed their second son, Alexander. For Roy, this was a chance to rebuild some of the family life he had lost, even though nothing was going to take the place of the people he had lost. This time was the beginning of a new chapter, one where London's magic, new love, and fatherhood provided him with new reasons to start over. His wealth. Roy Orbison wasn't only a music icon. He was a man who created a lasting legacy that continued to bring in money many years after he was dead. At the time of his death in December of 1988, he had had decades of top-charting hits, blockbuster collaborations, and global tours. But what's fascinating is how his wealth kept increasing. Throughout his career, Orbison earned most of his fortune from album sales, concert appearances, and song royalties from his numerous hits. He experienced a series of hits in the 1960s with such landmarks as Only the Lonely, Oh Pretty Woman, and Crying, which generated large amounts of money at the time. His career received a massive boost in the late 1980s, courtesy of his collaboration with supergroup Traveling Wilburys and the release of his last album, Mystery Girl. Both were mammoth commercial hits, earning him millions of dollars. What made Orbison's fortune so unique was that it didn't erode after his death. Indeed, it increased. His music catalog kept earning him royalties via radio rotation, TV and movie licensing, and re-released albums. The Mystery Girl album alone became his best-selling work, and the success of the Traveling Wilburys added yet more to his estate. Orbison's widow, Barbara Orbison, was instrumental in maintaining and safeguarding his legacy. She opened Roy Orbison Enterprises, which handled reissues, box sets, and license agreements. This astute management kept his music current and lucrative for decades. Following Barbara's death in 2011, his sons inherited the company, continuing to release unusual recordings and special anniversary editions of his music, which kept royalties coming in. Estimates place Roy Orbison's estate worth tens of millions of dollars over the decades. His classic songs continue to be popular, and every new generation is introduced to his music through streaming websites, advertisements, and movies. Ultimately, Orbison's fortune was not merely a matter of dollars, it was the worth of universal art. His voice, his writing, and his gift for communicating with audiences have sustained his music, ensuring that both his artistic and monetary fortunes endure even decades after he played his last note. Roy Orbison's sunglasses style. Roy Orbison's trademark appearance, the dark glasses, wasn't intended, really. It all began due to his poor vision. Born as the second of 3 boys to Orby Lee Orbison, an oil well driller and auto mechanic, and Nadine Vesta Schultz, a nurse, Roy suffered from poor eyesight since a very young age. At the age of just 4, he was already sporting thick corrective glasses, and the specs became an integral part of his daily life. Flash forward to 1963, when Roy was set to launch a large tour in the UK with none other than the Beatles. It was a career highlight. He was playing with the largest band in the world. But just before the tour started, something odd occurred. In his own words, as told to his son Roy Jr., The singer forgot his standard prescription glasses on the plane. The issue was, Roy could not see well without them. All he had on him was his dark prescription sunglasses. They weren't for fashion, they were just in case of an eyesight backup. With no other options, Roy wore them on appearances and performances. That one little choice upended everything. Photographers soon took pictures of him with the dark shades on, and fans immediately took notice. What was initially a convenient solution for bad eyesight suddenly became an iconic aspect of his persona. Fans began to identify Roy Orbison with the enigmatic, cool demeanor of a man in dark glasses. From that moment on, the sunglasses weren't only for eyesight. They became an integral part of his stage image. They added an aura of intrigue, which suited his suave, heartfelt singing voice just right. Over time, Roy embraced the look, sporting the dark glasses on the street and on stage, until it was one of the most recognizable images in music history. It's amusing to consider that something that had originated in need could ultimately find its way into such a definitive aspect of a legend's persona. With Roy Orbison, sunglasses were not just something to wear, but a symbol. Roy Orbison's final days and sudden passing. By the end of 1988, Roy Orbison's career was in full swing again. He was touring, recording, and even making a movie with the Traveling Wilburys, the supergroup that had united him with such legends as George Harrison, Bob Dylan, Tom Petty, and Jeff Lynne. On December 4, 1988, he performed at the Front Row Theater in Highland Heights, Ohio. The performance was good, but Roy was obviously drained. Later, he returned to his home in Hendersonville, Tennessee, to take a few days' rest before flying to London to shoot additional music videos. Big things were in the works, including tours throughout the U.S. and Europe for the upcoming year. On December 6th, 2 days following that concert, Roy had a quiet, uneventful day. He took his bus driver and good friend Benny Birchfield out with him to do some shopping for model airplane parts, one of his favorite pastimes. That night, Benny invited him into supper at his house, shared by his wife, country singer Jean Shepherd. Following the meal, Roy decided to visit his mother's house nearby. There, he talked with his son Wesley, catching up in a warm, mundane moment. But in a moment, everything was different. During his visit, Roy stepped out at one point to use the bathroom. When he didn't reappear in half an hour, alarm replaced worry. He was discovered on the bathroom floor in a collapsed state. Paramedics took him to the hospital, but too late. Roy Orbison had suffered a heart attack. He was 52 years old. The news struck his family, friends, and fans hard. 5 days later, on December 11th, there was a public memorial at the College Heights Baptist Church in Gallatin, Tennessee, which was planned by Jean Shepherd. Fans attended to bid farewell, and fellow artists attended to pay their respects. 2 days later, in Los Angeles, Roy's wife, Barbara, organized a celebration of life at the Wiltern Theater that was attended by celebrities and music industry friends. Roy Orbison was buried in Westwood Village Memorial Park Cemetery in Los Angeles, in an unmarked grave, humble and low-key, just like the man behind the black sunglasses who had left the world some of its most beautifully haunting music. How Roy Orbison conquered the charts after his death. Roy Orbison's last studio album, Mystery Girl, appeared on store shelves on January 31st, 1989, only weeks after his death, and proved to be the largest-selling album of his career. It was released by Virgin Records, and a wonderful blend of his timeless, tearful style covered with new, contemporary production. Rolling Stone defined it exactly right, stating the album envelops the sweeping grandeur and epic sweep of his old-school sound with ultra-careful, high-tech production. A proper goodbye to one of the most distinctive voices in music. The highlight of Mystery Girl was You Got It, a song Orbison wrote with the assistance of Jeff Lynne and Tom Petty. It reached the 9 slot in the U.S. and the 3 position in the UK, and nominated him posthumously for a Grammy. The song's emotive lyrics and its catchy melody, which instantly stuck in one's mind, made it one of his most successful songs. But Mystery Girl wasn't the lone cause of Roy Orbison leading the charts in 1989. Just a few months prior, he had been in the superband Traveling Wilburys with George Harrison, Bob Dylan, Jeff Lynne, and Tom Petty. Their first album, Traveling Wilburys Volume 1, which spent an astonishing 53 weeks on the U.S. charts, reached number 3. It reached number 1 in Australia, number 16 in the UK, and even won a Grammy Award for Best Rock Performance by a duo or group. Rolling Stone subsequently placed it in their top 100 albums of the decade. Then came a poignant, record-breaking moment. On April 8, 1989, Orbison became the first artist since Elvis Presley to have 2 albums in the U.S. top 5 posthumously, with Traveling Wilburys Volume 1 at number 4 and Mystery Girl at number 5. In the UK, his death-induced success was even greater. On February 11, 1989, Mystery Girl was number 2, and his anthology album, The Legendary Roy Orbison, was number 3. The music videos developed their own emotional narratives. In Handle with Care, Orbison was there in the foreground with the band. But in End of the Line, which came out after his death, his solo sequences were characterized by a touching visual. His guitar in a rocking chair beside a framed picture of him. Even in the post-'80s years, his music continued to find new listeners. Albums such as King of Hearts, 1992, and The Very Best of Roy Orbison, 1996, perpetuated his legacy. His estate was controlled by his wife, Barbara, until her death in 2011, when his sons Alex and Roy Jr. took over. In 2014, they even assisted in reissuing The Way Is Love, a track that Roy had taped on a basic cassette in the 80s, adding instrumentation to revive it yet again. Roy may have departed the stage too early, but his voice has never ceased singing. Roy Orbison's story is more than just a journey through music. It's a life that blended mystery, resilience, and raw talent in a way few artists could match. Behind the soaring vocals and timeless hits was a man who faced his share of personal trials, industry pressures, and unexpected turns. Yet, instead of letting those challenges define him, Roy transformed them into the very heart of his artistry. What makes his legacy so powerful is how personal his music still feels. Decades later, songs like "Oh, Pretty Woman" and "Crying" don't just sound like old hits. They still carry the same emotional punch they did the first time they were played. His ability to connect so deeply with audiences came from a place of truth. Whether it was heartbreak, longing, or quiet hope, he knew how to wrap real feelings in unforgettable melodies. Roy also proved that reinvention was possible at any stage in life. Even after the highs of the 1960s faded and his career faced downturns, he found ways to step back into the spotlight, reminding the world why his voice was one of a kind. That persistence, combined with a deep love for his craft, is what makes his story so inspiring today. His influence stretches far beyond his own era. Modern musicians continue to draw from his style, his stage presence, and his emotional honesty. Fans old and new keep finding his songs, proving that great music never truly fades away. In the end, Roy Orbison wasn't just a rock and roll icon. He was a storyteller whose music still speaks across generations. His voice, his style, and his quiet strength have ensured that his place in music history will never be forgotten. And that wraps up the incredible story of Roy Orbison. A legend whose voice could break your heart and heal it at the same time. If you enjoyed getting into his life and legacy with us, make sure to hit that like button. It really helps us keep bringing you more stories like this. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss out on our next deep exploration into the lives of music's greatest icons. Thanks for watching, And we'll see you in the next one.